Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir daf samach aleph. This is the daf for Shabbat. We're going to start from the very top of our daf. Tani Rabbi Chia, in the context of these number of possible shavings one could do for someone who is maybe a leper, maybe a Nazir became impure, or maybe became pure, not maybe a Nazir. Anyway, we saw why can't you combine these shavings? Theoretically, you could do one shaving that counts for two things. To which they said you can't combine the shavings of the leper and the Nazir became impure, or the Nazir at the end of his process, because when you're talking about the Nazir who became impure, you have an issue because there's a difference between them. The Mitzora, they both shave on the seventh day, but the Mitzora, the leper, shaves before he goes in the mikvah, and the Nazir shaves after he goes to the mikvah. And that's based on the order of the way it's described in the verses in the Torah. And when it comes to the Nazir who's pure, he actually goes to the mikvah on day number 8, as opposed to the leper who goes on day number 7. The leper goes before he brings his sacrifices on day 8. He goes on day 7. It's before day 8 when he brings his sacrifices. He goes on day 7. That's before you sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice, before you even start the process of the sacrifices. Whereas the Nazir, when he's actually pure and he finishes his process, he shaves after he does his sacrifices on day 8. So because of that, those two differences, we don't overlap the shavings. Now comes a question. They quote this line from the Mishnah, even though it's not really connected with the Mishnah, or not directly, we'll see. By Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama says, Hani arbat tiglachuyot dekamra. By the way, it's not that it doesn't connect with the Mishnah. It doesn't really connect with that line in the Mishnah. So now these 4 shavings that this person has to do, mishum mitzva, or mishum iabure se'al tum'ah. Now they're not really talking about the 4 shavings. Another word that doesn't really belong here, the 4 shavings. What they mean is they're asking about a Nazir who became impure. And they're saying the following thing. Does he need to shave his hair? Is there a mitzvah specifically to get rid of the hair that grew during the days you were impure, or that was there from when you became impure, the hair that was on your head and that grew? Is that a mitzvah? Or is it just to get rid of? Is there a mitzvah to get rid of? Or is it just that we don't want the hair to be there? I actually worded it a little wrong. Is there a mitzvah to get rid of your hair? Meaning the act of shaving your hair is a mitzvah. Or is it just that we want to get rid of any hair that was there from before and while you were impure? We want to get rid of it, kind of start with a clean slate. To which they ask before they get to an answer, what's the relevance? Well, there's big relevance. You could use a depilatory cream to get rid of it. If the whole idea, this is what we generally talk about, ma'aseh totzah, is the action, what's important, the shaving, or is it the result? We just care that you don't have hair, so we don't care how you got no hair. If you use depilatory cream, that's fine. If you need to shave, you can't use a depilatory cream, you have to shave. So, I skipped the line. If there's a special mitzvah to shave, you can't just use a depilatory cream. Trying to get rid of your impure hair, you could even use a cream. So what's the halacha? Rava says, here's our answer. Tashma, we can learn it from our case. Now, why do you shave 4 times? If you're trying to get rid of your hair and all you need is just for the hair to be gone, well, it should be enough just to do 3. Why? Well, different interpretations of this line, but we'll go with what seems to me the simpler reading, which is when you shave for the leper, you're basically also getting rid of the hair that grew before, from when you became impure. Or from before and when you were impure. So therefore, you could be able to overlap those 2 and then not have 4 and only have 3 shavings. So shmamina mishum mitzvah shmamina. From here you can infer it must be a mitzvah to actually shave, and that's why you have to do 4 separate shavings. And with that, Hadran alach shnei nazirim, and we're moving on to the 9th chapter. Hanochrim. You might have a different word. Some versions have hakutim, some versions have hagoyim or avdei kochavim. Okay, my version says nochrim. Okay, Gentiles. Even if you say the version of kutim is definitely not really the accurate one, because we're clearly talking about Gentiles here. You'll see from the rest of the sugya. Right, as kutim were kind of in between. Some people, right, they were converts, maybe they weren't real converts, but we're really talking about regular non-Jews. Ein lahem nizirut. There's no nizirut for them. Okay, it's not they can't become nizirim according to Jewish law. Nashim va'avadim, women and slaves. Yesh lahem nizirut. In a minute, we're going to see the difference between them. Okay, women often get categorized together with slaves in a lot of ways. First of all, they're both excluded from time-bound mitzvah. We're talking, by the way, slaves. We're talking about Canaanite slaves. Those are ones who came to live in your house. They would get, if they were male, they had a brit milah. They became pseudo-Jews, okay? And they were chayav and mitzvot. They just don't have to do mitzvot that are time-bound because they're bound to their master. Now, it's not necessarily the same reason why women can't. And in fact, you're going to see in our sugya a differentiation between women and slaves. So they often get put together because they have similar laws, but not necessarily in the same way. It's not like the slaves are owned by their husbands. The women are not considered owned by their husbands. Don't get confused by that. Okay, we're going to see that explicitly in our sugya. So for those who try to say, oh, look, the Gemara, they're against women. They put them in the same category as bought items. I mean, forget about slaves in general. It's a whole problem. How do we own people? I'm not going to go there. It was a whole different world then in the way they had slaves then. We don't do this anyway nowadays. But don't think of women like that. They're different. Okay, we're going to see that in today's sugya. But in any case, they point out that women and slaves can be nizirim. Now, women, it says explicitly in the pasuk. There's no question. Okay, and often in the halacha, they try to say it says kol ha'ezrach, every citizen. Does that include women? Does it not include women? But here it's very clear. It says, the bnei Israel speak to the Jewish people. Va'amarta lehem, and say to them, ish o isha, a man or a woman, ki yafli lindor neder nazir lashem, if they become a nazir. So it's clear, we even saw all these cases of women who were nizirah. So anyway, women can be nizirah. And there's a certain stringency about women over slaves. A person can force his slave to drink wine, even if the slave is a nazir, whereas you can't force his wife. He can nullify her vow, but if he didn't, on the day he heard, then it's already valid, and he can't make her go against her vow. How can he do that to his slave? We're going to see that on Daf Samachet, not today's Daf. So now the Gemara starts off and says, where do we get the Gentiles can't become Nazirim? Ditanu Rabbanit, as we see in a braita. And this is what's going to be our main topic for today. Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the Jewish people about Nazirut, right? So, it excludes Gentiles. How do we get avadim to be included? Well, then it says, "Va'amart alehem," and say to them, who's the them? Bnei Israel. But it must be including something additional. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to say it. It must be lerabot et avadim. That comes to include the slave. To which we'll ask a side question on the slave, and then we'll get back to the Gentiles. Lerabot avadim, right? Lama likra. Why do you need a pasuk for that? Ha'amar, didn't we say? And I just told you this. Any commandment that a woman's obligated, a slave is obligated. So wouldn't you learn it from there? And here comes our big line distinguishing between them. No, it's different here. Why? The pasuk says, and this is by vows in general, not Nazir, but not Nazir, but Nazir is a type of, you become a Nazir by vowing. So it says by vows, la'esor isar al nafsho, to forbid something on your soul. B'misha nafsho knuyalo, it's only someone who is in charge of their own soul. Okay, again, this is a little difficult in terms of understanding the way they viewed slaves. But yatsa eved she'ein nafsho knuyalo. What does it mean? His soul isn't acquired by himself, meaning someone else owns rights to him. Okay, somebody owns him. It's true. They viewed him as a possession of the master. But that's different, right? Yatsa eved she'ein nafsho knuyalo, right? Ho'il ve'ein nafsho knuyalo. Sorry. So what do you see here? Women are in charge of themselves. And maybe they have certain responsibilities to their husband, but they're their own, they're not owned by their husband. Whereas a slave is owned by the master. And that's the distinction. And then what would you say? So you might think, since he can't take vows because he's not in charge of his own soul, you might think it would be the same by Nazir. That's why you need a special drasha to include them for nizirut. So they can't take vows in general, but yes, they can be nizirut. That's a unique halacha for Gentile slaves, for Canaanite slaves. Now we're going to go back to Gentiles. And the Gemara is going to ask a question, which is going to take us to the end of the daf. Amar Taber el bnei Israel below lovdei kochavim. Right? That's what we just said. Bnei Israel come to say just Jews, not Gentiles. Anytime it says bnei Israel, this excludes Gentiles. We're going to see the same type of language by Erchin, and it's going to be different. It says, Dichtiv, Daber el bnei Israel. The pasuk starts off just like ours. Daber el bnei Israel v'amarta lehem. We're in Vayikra, chapter 27, verse 2. Ish ki yafli neder be'el kecha nefashot la'Hashem. A person who takes on a vow and be'er kachot nafsho. Nefashot. What does that mean? I say I'm taking on the value of so-and-so to the temple. Okay, I say the value of my son I'm bringing to the temple. Value of my daughter. So I have to bring what the Torah states is the value of a person between these ages, male or female, different amounts. That's a whole separate section. We'll get to it. We have a whole Masechet Erechim. We will deal with it a lot then. The point here being, it says here, Daber bnei yisrael, Vitanya. And what does it say about this? Bnei, the braita says, bnei yisrael ma'arichim, ve'en ovdei kochavim ma'arichim. Because it says bnei Israel, it excludes Gentiles. So far, so good. Same thing as by us. It excludes Gentiles from this word. Here it excludes Gentiles. If a Gentile says, I'm giving the value of so-and-so to the temple, it's not a valid statement. You might have thought maybe they're also not considered. If I say I'm giving the value of a Gentile friend of mine to the temple, maybe I give nothing because maybe that means nothing. Just like a Gentile can't be the one giving the value, committing the value, maybe the Gentile also can't be the one who is being valued. You might have thought that, but Talmud lomar ish. Here comes the big thing that's going to take us for today, which is ish, the word ish, okay, because again, what did the pasuk say? Ish ki yafli neder, a person who makes a neder. Person includes Gentiles as well. They're people just like we are. Bnei Yisrael is obviously just Jews, but ish is a person. So what do we see here? Gentiles are somewhat in the picture when it comes to Erechim. When it comes to Nazir, we said they're totally out of the picture, even though by Nazir, we have the exact same set of words. We have bnei Israel in the beginning, and then we have ish. We have isha, isha. Either which way, it would include Gentiles. So we have a problem. We're going to have four kind of approaches, major approaches of dealing with this topic, at least the way I view the sugya. There might be different ways that people separate it. I thought to separate it into these four categories. And each one is going to try to explain somehow why the Ovdei Kochavim are on the outs. Okay? In different ways. So the first is to say, and why in Erechim they're in somewhat. Shanehacha, it's different here by Nazir. Why? Because there's another pasuk you're ignoring. What is it? It says la'aviv u'li'imo lo yitama. It says a Nazir can't become impure to his father or mother, or her father or mother, which teaches us b'mi sheyesh lo av. It must be a Nazir can only be someone who has a father. Yatzau ve'kochavim she'en lo av. We remove Gentiles who don't have parents. Don't have a father. What does it mean? Gentile doesn't have a father. What do you mean? Of course they have fathers. That's a weird thing. Limai. So for what do you mean? So the first, again, I said there's four approaches, but within each one, there's a few things. So the first approach is to say he's out of the picture because he doesn't have a father. Now the question is going to be, how does he not have a father? And we're going to have two different suggestions here, but each are going to be rejected. If you're going to say he doesn't inherit anybody, right? He doesn't inherit his father. There's no laws of inheritance from father to son by Gentiles. Okay, like for example, if you convert as a family, you're a katan shenolad. It's as if you were reborn. So you don't go by your father anymore. You don't get inheritance. Happens that by Torah law, they actually do have inheritance. And we learn that from the pasuk that says, that Yerusha Natati, I gave, this is in Sefer Dvarim, chapter 2, verse 8, verse 5, maybe actually 5. It says, I gave a son as inheritance, our Seir. So there you see, there is inheritance. So that was just the rabbi said, laws of inheritance don't apply, but by Torah law, they really do. And that's all topic. We're not going to get into details now, but that's what they say. Maybe it's someone who is only someone who's commanded to respect his parents, and Gentiles are not commanded to respect their parents. It's a mitzvah from the Torah. It's not one of the 7 Noachide laws, to which they say, Miktiv kabed avicha gabe Nazir. What does respecting a father have anything to do with the halachot of Nazir and becoming impure? They can't become impure to his father. They don't really connect. So the Gemara rejects this because they can't find where we see the Gentiles don't have fathers. They really do, and therefore it doesn't seem to work. And again, they tried inheritance. That didn't work because by Torah law, they really do. And then they tried this respect for the father, but they said that has nothing to do with this. Ella. So second attempt. Same pasuk, but a different focus on the pasuk. Cannot become impure to your father or mother, is the Nazir. Well, it would show from here that Nazirut only applies b'misha yeshlo tum'ah, someone who actually becomes impure. Yatzah ovei kochavim she'lo tum'ah, but in ovei, right? It's telling you can't become impure, but it means you can become impure. Theoretically, you just can't do it practically because you're a Nazir. But an ovei kochavim can't theoretically become impure at all. So that's a problem, right? That means they're on the outs. This actually answers the one that's actually going to work, but we're going to have a little issue with it first. Minalan delayed l'tumah. They're going to say, how do we know that ovei kochavim doesn't have laws of impurity? Damaka, the pasuk says, "V'ish asher yitma v'lo yitchata v'nechlata nefesh mitoch hakahal." Okay, here's a pasuk from Bamidbar, chapter 19, verse 20, in the section about the para aduma. If you become impure and you do not purify yourself, you will get karet, and it says mitoch hakahal, from within the congregation, meaning you'll be cut off from within your congregation. Now, it's a strange pasuk. What do you mean? If you become impure and you don't become pure, it's a problem. You get karet. Well, the continuation of the pasuk says, you defile the temple. What it really seems to mean is if you come into the temple and without becoming pure. That's an aside. Right now, they say, what do you see here? You're only going to get karet if you're within part of the nation. So someone who doesn't have, you're not part of the congregation because you're a Gentile, you're not part of the Jewish congregation. Therefore, you're not considered someone who can become impure. But the Gemara rejects this first attempt and is going to say, Mimai, the whole pasuk about the kahal, which the congregation was talking about getting karet, the punishment. But maybe you do become impure, but you won't get the punishment of karet because you're not even part of the congregation to then be cut off from within the congregation. So that doesn't prove that there's no laws of impurity for a Gentile. So attempt number two within, again, this is attempt number 2 out of 2, right? We so far had out of 4 eventually, but we had maybe he doesn't have a father. We rejected that because we tried 2 possibilities, neither worked. Now we're going to say he doesn't have loss of impurity. We tried the first one. That didn't work to prove how we know he doesn't have loss of impurity. This one we're going to actually bring, question, but then resolve. So this one will stand. Amarka, the pasuk says, V'hizah tahor ala tameh. Who sprinkles the para aduma, the red heifer waters, on the impure person? Someone who's pure. Well, what do you see in this pasuk? Purity and impurity are mentioned right next to each other, tahol and tameh. Misha yeshlo tahara, yeshlo tum'ah. From there we learn one who's impure one who can become pure can also become impure. But if you can't become pure, you don't have the ability to become impure. Okay, now how do we know you can't become pure if you're a Gentile? Because it says in the whole section of the red heifer, this is mishmeret lebnei Israel. This is for the Jewish people. So the para aduma, which is to purify you, is specifically for Jews. If that's the case, since you can't become impure, they learn from this pasuk, the juxtaposition of tahor and tameh, only someone who can become pure is allowed to, it can actually become impure. To which they say, not exactly. Ve'ema, you could say tahara u'delo havyale, tuma havyale. You're missing a little something here, which the Rush fills in, which is maybe that pasuk shouldn't be darshaned in that way. Because in fact, we darshan something else from that pasuk. And once you no longer have that juxtaposition, then you can say this line, which is, you can say maybe they can't become pure, because Mishmeret bnei Yisrael, it's specifically given to the Jews to watch over, but maybe you could still become impure. Who's to say those are connected? To which the Gemara answers, I still call this within the second attempt here, within the second attempt, and again, second attempt because we're trying to say Gentiles don't have impurity. We tried to prove it from Isha Sheyit Mavalei Chatav and Mikocha Kahal, right? He was cut off from within the congregation. We couldn't prove it from there. We tried to prove it from Hizat or Latameh. We're going to prove it from what we prove from here, but in the end, we're going to choose a different verse. And it was the verse we started with. Amar Kha Isha Sheyit Ma Veloyit Chatav. In the end, we can say it's based on this verse. A person who becomes impure and doesn't purify himself. From there, we learn the one who can become impure is going to also be able to be impure. But you can't become impure if you can't purify yourself. So in the end, we do say that that's a valid explanation. And that's why he can't be part of Nazir. So theoretically, bnei Yisrael would exclude, Ish would include, but this other pasuk, it has to be someone who's in the world of Tum and Tara. and a Gentile is not, which we just proved from lo yitma v'lo yitchata and the mishmeret of bnei Israel that it's for to the Jewish people, specifically the red heifer waters to purify. Okay, now we could have stopped here, but the Gemara, and there's different ways to understand this. Either this is going back to the thing about not having a father and Yerusha, or this is talking about something else. I'd like to view it. It seems weird that we'd be going back to that at this point. So it seems more likely that this is something else, which is a third track. Rav, again, trying to explain the difference between erchin, valuation, and our sugi. And the Nazir. Rav Akabar Yaakov Amar, Shani Hacha, again, Nazir is different to Amar Kra. It says, so again, we're back to the father thing. And a father passes on inheritance of land to his children. And here, inheritance doesn't really mean land, though. It means avadim k'nanim, Gentile slaves. Now, this does not apply to non-Jews. Non-Jews don't have the ability in Jewish law, okay, according to the way we view things, I'm not going to get into this, although we did learn it at some point, to acquire Gentile slaves. When they have Gentile slaves, they're not acquired the way we acquire them, okay, for whatever reason that is. So it says here, you can pass them on to your children after you. Now, we talked about this Nazir having a father. So now they're going to say, if you have nachala, then you'll be part of these laws of tumah that you can be tamei, that you can't become tamei to your father, which is for the Nazir. If you don't have a father that will pass you down of these Canaanite slaves, which is Gentiles who can't do that, then they're not part of this laws of tumah. Okay, and then they can't do this. And that's because of, again, the pasuk, lavi v'limo lo yitama. Okay, so that sounds like a good explanation. Well, what's the problem? But then we take out avadim k'nanim also can't become nizilim because they can't pass on, obviously. They don't own anything. They can't pass it on to their children. So we'd have to remove them also. And we know they are part of it. So that logic doesn't work. So this one falls to the side. Now Rava's going to say the following. Rava's going to try to explain. It's a good way it's unclear whether Rava is trying to prove maybe we should understand Nazir a little bit different, but then each time he's going to say no, no, no. So maybe in the end, he's just trying to raise possibilities to show you that they're not options. And to show that maybe Nazir is like Erchin in the sense that we have on the one hand Ish, which includes Gentiles. We have bnei Israel, which excludes, and then they're pulling at each other. And with Erchin, we came to this middle ground. They can't do valuations, but you can evaluate, you can bring the value of one of them to the temple. So maybe we should do the same thing with Nazir. I'm going to give 4 attempts within this 4th answer. Ela amar Rava. So Rava says, Bishlam agabe erchin shenemar bnei Yisrael. So from there we learn bnei Yisrael marichin ve'en ovdei kochavim marichin. This is going to learn out that halacha that we already know, which is by valuations it says that bnei Yisrael, just Jews, not Gentiles. You might have thought that if someone brings the value of one of them, maybe it wouldn't be valid. Talmud lomar ish, because of that it says ish, which comes to include. Hacha bnei Israel nozlim. So now let's take it to us. By us, bnei Israel nozlim u'meviim korban ve'ein ovdim kochavim nozlim u'meviim korban. So now they say, well, maybe Jews bring korbanot. Jews become nizirim and bring sacrifices with it. Maybe Gentiles can become a Nazir, but they don't bring the sacrifices at the end. Maybe we make this distinction, like where they're in part and out part, just because of the bnei Israel and the Ish, and it's the balance. Yachol aflo yihu nizirim klal. Well, you might tell me if they're not bringing a sacrifice, maybe they're not nizirim at all. Talmud lomar Ish. Okay, so that's where I said there's the balance. All of these are going to kind of end with Ish, even though I would have started with it, right? The Ish tells you that they are a Nazir, but the bnei Israel comes to tell you they're out. Why does it go in the opposite order? Because bnei Israel appears first and then Ish. So they're darshaning it in the order of the pasuk. Amre, so they reject this option. No, it's not that they don't bring a korban. How do we know this? Well, they don't bring a korban, but we actually know that from somewhere else. So you can't say that the word bnei Israel is coming to say they don't bring a korban, because we actually have a different drasha that says the Gentiles can't bring a korban nazil. Where do we learn this from? Amre, mishum korban lav mehachan afkele mehatam. If you want to learn, don't bring sacrifice of nazir. We learn that from somewhere else. So again, bnei Israel is not available to teach that because we already know it from somewhere else. You don't need another drasha for the same halacha. Where do we learn it from? Elamehatam leola prat lenizirut divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili reads the following pasuk. It's in Vayikra chapter 22, verse 18. Daber bnei Yisrael v'albanav, speak to Aaron and his sons, ve'kol bnei Yisrael, to all the Jewish people, v'amarta lehem, ish mi beit Yisrael, anyone from Yisrael, umin ager b'Yisrael, or gerimin among the Jews, and it seems to be applying also to Gentiles. Asher yakriv korbano lechol nidrehem lechol nidvotam asher yakriv LaHashem le'olah. From there, they learn Gentiles can bring korban olah, but they can't bring a korban nazir. Okay, that's what they learn from here. So now they say, right, I'm not going to get into where they get from here that includes Gentiles and all that, but that's a whole drasha in and of itself. So now they say the following. Since le'olah comes to exclude the nazir from bringing a korban, you can't say bnei Yisrael is coming to exclude from korban, and therefore this whole drasha falls to the side. Second option within this. So now we're in option 4, option 2 within number 4. Maybe Jews can take on Nizirut forever, but a Gentile can't take on a Nizirut forever. Only, a 30-day period or something like that. So you might have thought maybe they can't be Nizirim at all. Talmud Lomar Ish. But the pasuk says Ish, which comes to say again, Ish and not, right? And which means including Gentiles. So that would say, right? Therefore it says Ish. To teach you they can be, one second. Holo you Nizirim. Right. Talmud Lomar Ish. So that seems to say that, again, Ish would say they can be a Nazir, but they can't be Nazir Olam from bnei Yisrael. To which the Gemara says, no, I'm Rabbi Yochanan, Michtiv Nazir Olam. Doesn't say anywhere in the pasuk, speak to bnei Yisrael and tell them they could be Nazirei Olam. Never said that in the pasuk, so you can't say it says only Jews could be Nazir Olam and not Gentiles. It had nothing to do with Nazir Olam in the pasukim. It didn't say anything about being a Nazir forever. So you can't say that. So again, all of these are attempts to try to say, maybe this is just like Erchin, and then they say, you can't say that. So basically, it's different than Erchin. Next, third attempt. This is another halacha that maybe we'll say, because of bnei Yisrael, it's coming to say they can't make their sons a Nazir. Remember, a father can make his son a Nazir if he's underage, but maybe a Gentile can't do that halacha. And that's what bnei Yisrael is coming to exclude. And if you want to say, Yacholo yu Nazirim, and if you want to think maybe they can't be Nazirim at all, Talmud Lomar Ish, Isha then comes to include. So that doesn't work either. Why? But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say that whole law about a father making his son a Nazir is only halacha l'moshe misinai, which means you're not going to have a drasha from the Torah coming to say the law that's later was passed on to Moshe at Sinai, which wasn't written in the Torah, is not for Gentiles. It doesn't work. Halacha l'moshe misinai isn't in the Torah. So you can't say that there's a drasha on a word in the Torah to say this law that came later doesn't apply then. It doesn't make any sense. And we're going to have the exact same answer for the fourth and final attempt. Maybe, again, we keep going back to this Ish and bnei Yisrael. Ish comes to say maybe they're a Nazir. Bnei Yisrael comes to say Gentiles can't be Nazir. So again, we're trying to figure out, maybe bnei Yisrael comes to say we can't be certain halacha within Nazir. What would that be? That if you remember, we learned that a son can take the money from his father. If his father died, that's the basic case anyway. It could be applied in other cases as well, but the basic case where it's mostly agreed upon, a father dies, the son can take on the Nazirut, the money. Take the money the father set aside for his sacrifice and say, I'm using this money for my sacrifices. So maybe you'll say, bnei Yisrael can do that, but use their money from their father, but maybe Yovdei Kochavim can't do that, but Gentiles can't. Yachol lo yu Nazirim, I'm just continuing to the next stop for one more second. You might have thought they can't be Nazirim. Talmud Lomar Ish. Again, the Ish comes to say they're a Nazir. The bnei Yisrael comes to say, but they can't shave using their father's money, use their sacrifices, the money for their father's sacrifice. But again, Rabbi Yochanan also said that was halacha l'moshe misinai from Nazir, by Nazir, which means you can't have a drasha on a halacha l'moshe misinai, because that came after. Doesn't make any sense. So that's our daf. Again, what did we try to do? Let's start from the beginning. First, we distinguished between the tiglachat of the mitzvah and the Nazir, why they're different, why you can't overlap, and then why they can't even overlap, right? If the whole idea, maybe the Nazirut of Tum'ah was just to get rid of the hair, in which case you could use the depilatory cream, in which case you could overlap the tiglachot, you would only need one of them, safek mitzvah, and you wouldn't need another one for the fact that maybe he was impure, and the fact that we don't allow that shows that we need specifically a ma'aseh tiglachat. You need to do the action. Then we move to this new halacha about who's the new parak, the new chapter about who can be a Nazir, who can't be a Nazir. Women, yes. Canaanite slaves, yes, even though they're different from women, we showed. And there's a special drasha specifically to include them, whereas the women, it's explicit in the verse. And then we had Gentiles don't have Nazirut. And then we basically brought this pasuk to prove it, because it says bnei Yisrael and not Gentiles. But then we said, but what about Erchin, where it has bnei Yisrael and then it has Ish? And that includes, so either we learn it from the special pasuk, we tried to learn it, Lavivu limo lo yitama, they don't have fathers, Gentiles, to which we said, well, it doesn't make sense to say that here they do have fathers, or it's not relevant, that issue, like kibud av isn't relevant to this topic. So reject that. Then we said maybe they don't have impurity, which we tried to prove where we know they don't have impurity. We finally found a pasuk that shows it, and therefore it shows if you can't become pure, then you can't become impure. And that was asher yachta velo. Asher yitma velo yitchata. So there you see, lo yitchata means he didn't become pure. So you see pure and impure next to each other in the pasuk. So therefore, only when it can become pure, which we learned from the paraduma, can become impure. Then we moved on to a third attempt, which was to say maybe they're not part of Nachala, and because they're not part of Nachala, they can't be part of impurity. And then again, that connected to that whole pasuk about being impure to the father. But we disproved that one, because then we remove Avadim as well. And then we have this fourth thing of Rava, where he tried to say that maybe we'll try to compare it to Erchin and say it's you're partially a Nazir, you are a Nazir, but you don't have sacrifice. You are a Nazir, but you can't do this halacha. You are a Nazir, but right, or but something. But in the end, we reject all of them, and none of them stand the test, which is why in the end we're going to say, so this one also stands, which is in the end, the Ovei Kochavim is on the outs. There's no Nazirut at all. Even though this word Ish, which in Erchin included them in some way, by Nazir, they're not included at all. And that's because we have no real way to partially include them. There's really no such thing. That's it for today's daf. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov.